When I took this class earlier this year in Revelation, it was mostly because the book was so dense that before or after you got past chapter 5, that it was almost unreadable to me. But the nice thing of it is that the problem is that most of us approach it like the guy, Hal Lindsey from the late great Planet Earth, or like Tim LaHaye for Are We Living in the End Times, and just about everybody else who goes and tries to interpret Revelation, because they get too caught up in the symbols and thinking they mean something that, well, clearly this means this, clearly this means that, and it's all wrong. It's all wrong, because John had a specific audience that he was writing to, and he was speaking something directly to them. It doesn't mean that we can't understand those symbols, but we also have to understand that the stuff we know now isn't going to be compared to what we know, say, 1,000 years from now. And what we understand to be taken as symbolic in these days isn't necessarily going to be easily unlocked by people 2,000 years from now. Just like when we look back, we have to have some secret knowledge, if you will. Not really secret knowledge, I'm not really big into gnosis. But we have to have a little bit of extra knowledge to be able to understand what John was saying, right? And so we want to recap a little bit here. And I'm thinking this is working, Alan. It says I'm in control. There we are. Okay. So quick recap. We have studied the inaugural vision of Jesus Christ and the message to the churches. So, it's the whole thing when John is sitting there, and all of a sudden he's in the Spirit when he's in the Isle of Patmos, and he's saying, I was in the Spirit, and Jesus came and said, hey, write these words down. I'm going to kind of pull back the curtain, because remember, the actual word for revelation is apocalypsis, but whenever we say it's revelation, we think apocalypse is, well, there's fires and there's all this other stuff. Not really. Apocalypse and revelation are really sort of the same thing. It's God pulling back the curtain so we can see through His eyes what He sees. And ultimately, Revelation is about a battle of good and evil in the spirit realm, and it's a call to repentance, which is really the center call in Revelation chapter 11. But the messages to the churches set those up. Amanda was telling me that she uploaded or was uploading the video on the 7 messages to the churches to our YouTube channel. So check it out. There's a handful of these videos up there, and the one that seems to be getting the most watch is the Mark of the Beast one. Okay, we've been to the throne room. We talked about what's going on in Revelation chapter 4 and 5, and how the sea is like glass because there can't be chaos in the presence of God, and how really that's where we should want to be. We should want to seek the throne room. I mean, how awesome would it be to continually be in the throne room? Guess what? You can do that. Yeah. You can do that even in the here and now, and we're blessed with a really good worship team. I just stand back there and make noise. So we're really good with being led into the throne room. We're really blessed in how we do these things, but we can still live that. I don't care if you can't sing a lick. Doesn't mean you're not promoted or you're not permitted in the throne room. You should really have a heart full of worship. And so what that means is essentially you're giving yourself entirely to God and saying, what is your will for me today? How will you use me? It's saying yes to His yes and not saying no. I actually answered a question on a website called Quora the other day. And they asked, what does it mean to be a compromised Christian? And I turned back to Revelation and Michael Gorman's book, the Reading Revelation Responsibly. It's starting to put things in God's place. I know Bill Johnson said that the definition of an idol is something that you have to ask permission from in order to make a move on God's behalf. That is compromise. But if you are uncompromised and you're seeking to stay uncompromised, you go to the throne room. Now, we've continued some of this on, like Revelation chapter 7. We did a 2-parter on there talking about the great multitude and the 144,000. We've kind of skipped ahead to the mark of the beast. But the last time we were here, the last time I spoke here on Revelation, there was only 9 of us in the room, which was really weird for me the first time, like looking at a camera. So then I would look over at Natalie, because she was the one who would say the most. She would go, amen. Good, you're listening. But it was kind of strange. But at that point, we had gotten through Revelation chapter 6. And who knows what happens in Revelation chapter 6, just off the top of your head? It's right up there. It's the very last line. We've seen the first 6 seals opened. And remember that when the sixth seal was opened, the entire world started crumbling. And people were hiding in the mountains and saying, okay, they should just kill us now, because who can stand in the day of the Lord? And then immediately, because now remember, that scroll was sealed with 7 seals. You know, we sing about unto the Lamb. He had a scroll sealed with 7 seals. And who is worthy? Only the Lamb. Right? So the first 6 seals have been opened. And if that was really the end of the world, if you start thinking about some of the stuff that happened, the calamities, that was it. They're really, okay, it ends at the end of chapter 6. But the problem is the book hasn't even been opened yet. Because you still have that 7th seal. So at this point, John's vision gets a lot more frightening. Okay? So we can sit there, and if you go peek at the end of the book, we really shouldn't be all that scared. We understand this reality of good versus evil in the spiritual realm, but you're starting to hear of people being killed, of things being destroyed, everything around us. These are visions that, as a matter of fact, we've already been told that God told John, hey, come up here. And so he's seeing it from the God's eye view. God sees lots of things that we don't see. So this is not literal. The stuff that we're going to read about, it can't be literal. Because if it was, the world, we don't even get to this point. The world's gone. It's complete. That's it. But it gets even worse in Revelation chapter 8, and that's where we're going to be. Bailey, I'm just going to have you take over for a sec because it's like really delayed. So Revelation chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. Now we're actually going to go through the entire chapter because it's a pretty short one. But it says here, when the Lamb broke the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Just really short time. Anytime you start seeing these things like there were 10 million and there was 7 of this and 4 million of this, about a half an hour. He's just saying, they got quiet. That 7th seal, that means the book was now open. Because all the stuff, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and all that stuff, that was just the opening act. It could not be John's revelation because the scroll was still sealed, right? You can't read a book if you don't open it up. It's impossible. I'm sure some weirdo will tell me it's possible, but I don't think it is. All right, go ahead to the next slide. It said, and I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Chris, apparently you're an angel. You play trumpet. Okay, next slide. Another angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him so that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. Next slide. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hand. Next slide. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and threw it to the earth. And there followed peals of thunder and sound and flashes of lightning and an earthquake. Really scary things. Now, here we have this tremendous build to the 7th seal. When you restart the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth seal, you start to see things. The first seal, the first horseman goes out. Second seal, second horseman goes out. Third, fourth. And they're bringing death and pestilence and war and famine. And the 6th seal, the world literally starts collapsing on itself, right? So naturally what we're thinking is, boy, Amanda, I do move around an awful lot, don't I? Yeah. Naturally what we're thinking is that when that 7th seal comes, holy smokes, there's a lot that's going to be here. But it says, when the 7th seal was open, there was silence for about a half an hour. And those of you who know your Old Testament really should see the link here, and we'll get to it here in a second, but we should have periods of silence when we get too busy, and it's all about us talking at God and doing all these things. We can't hear. You know, if Kim and I are having a conversation, and every time she starts to talk, I just start talking over her, not only is it rude, I can't hear what she's saying, right? Essentially, sometimes we have to remember, shut up. God has something to say. Right? And this is like understanding we don't always need to be talking in worship. God is often found in that silence. And this is a deliberate callback to 1 Kings. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. It's 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 11 through 13. This is a very familiar passage. He said, so he said, go forth and stand on the mountain before the Lord, And behold, the Lord was passing by, and a great and strong wind was rending the mountains and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Next slide. After the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. Next slide. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So you have all this imagery. The fire, the mighty wind, earthquakes, rocks crumbling, blowing. And it wasn't until things got quiet that all of a sudden God says, "What you doing here?" In other words, this silence with the seventh seal being opened is kind of like saying, "Hey, God has showed up." One of the ways, if you go to a West Virginia University football game, that you know the team's getting ready to take the field, there's a big, ugly, bearded guy with a gun comes out and shoots it. And then they say, "Let's bring on the Mountaineers." So there are signs where this stuff goes on. But that silence is God's introduction. And so you notice how everybody falls silent because that seventh seal, it's like, hey, the introductions are over. Here I am. See, these verses that we just read are about to set the scene for the seven trumpets. But Revelation 8:3 is a callback to Revelation 6:9 through 11. And remember, here's the thing. We talk about those prayers that are being burned in incense and in the censer and thrown and causing destruction. If you go back to when the fifth seal was opened, the martyrs are under the altar and say, "Hey, who's going to answer for us?" Guess what? They were given robes of white and say, "Look, just a minute longer." Guess who's now answering for them? See, that's where we're going here. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. God has shown up, and this creates further urgency. Last Wednesday, and then on Friday at the trick-or-treat party, shared the story of a young man that has really kind of left an impression on me. He's been gone for 7 years. Got a kid named Zach Sobiek. They just put a movie on Disney called Clouds, right? Now, yeah, really good. Short narrative is Zach found out he had osteosarcoma. They were treating him, found out the treatment wasn't working. He was told, "Look, you only got like maybe 6 months." Okay? Well, here's the thing, is that if this creates this urgency, there's a couple things you can go. You can be really bitter about it and act really bitter towards folk, or you can kind of be like what he said, is like, "Look, you don't have to find out you're dying to start living." And he said it creates an urgency to really kind of leave an impression. Now, I was struggle with this. What's going to be my legacy? Is it the guy who reads a lot of books and knows a lot of things? Okay, great. But what I would rather be known for is how I touch the lives of people around me for Jesus Christ. And if we know that God has shown up and the kingdom of God is near, and we've already been told that when Jesus Christ came and was crucified, resurrected, and ascended, that began the end times. There's no question. We are living in the end times, but it doesn't mean, hey, next Tuesday at 4, we're done. Doesn't mean that, right? But we need to live urgently, because now that we know this is going on, and at some point, there is going to be the last time you see somebody, the last time you talk to somebody, the last time you have the ability to share the gospel. We cannot take this lightly. Because once God shows up in this way, things start to move very quickly. So it was Revelation chapter 8, verses 6 through 13. And the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound them. Chris, how do you get ready to blow your trumpet? You go like, make faces, embouchure, and all that good stuff? Yeah. I'm embarrassing him. Is Kyle still in the lead? No, okay. Who? Oh, who? The first sounded, and there came hail and fire, mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Ugh. The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. Sounds fun. And a third of the creatures which were in the sea had life and died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Now you see, John is typically, he goes in sevens, he goes in quarters, he goes in thirds. See, there's something here. He's basically saying a huge number of all this stuff died. You know, if you talk about the 1918 flu pandemic, they say, hey, there was like this large number of people. It's sort of what's going on here. Next slide. The third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. Okay. What's the closest star to our planet? Really easy. The sun. 93 million miles away. Oh my gosh. If the sun suddenly crashed to the earth, what happens? Exactly. You realize that every planet in the solar system, along with all the asteroids and all the junk and everything, would just go in the sun. So this is your first clue, realistically, when you're reading all this stuff, that, hey, this ain't literal. Because again, if this really happens and a real star came down and hit the earth, we done, folks. That's it. There's no need to write anything further. It's like, John would go, and the end. It's kind of an awkward ending. I mean, it was sort of a downer at that point, right? But anyway, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of waters. Next slide. The name of the star is called wormwood. Now, here's what's interesting. Wormwood's a plant that makes things taste either sweet or bitter. It's not really poisonous, but it's really common, I guess. And a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. Next slide. The fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. Maybe it was called November. Next slide. And then I looked, and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a loud voice, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." It almost sounds like Joey Lawrence. To those who dwell on the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the angels that are about to sound. So we've only gotten four. Four trumpets. Got three more. And I peeked ahead. It ain't good there either. Right? But now we got to start thinking about John's symbolism here again. So the trumpet, I mean, what do you think of when you think of a trumpet in today's age? I mean, I think of the marching band folk. Whenever I was in the military, guess what woke us up? The sound of a trumpet. I guess technically a bugle, but it still sounded like a trumpet. What played taps when they brought the flag down? It was a trumpet. You go to a baseball game, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Well, they had three very specific purposes. Marla, why was that so funny? They had three very specific purposes. I'll be here next week, too. I won't be here. Three very specific purposes at the time when this was written. And we get to pick, hey, what is this announcing here? Right? What are these trumpets doing? So back in those days, it was a call to war. Just like when I was in the military, or if you're sitting there at a Pirates game, I won't declare anything other than a Pirates game. You hear that, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, what do they say? Charge. Right, it's a war thing. Or, again, military. You had your taps. You had your call to arms, you had to chew the colors, you had to stand there for all this other stuff. Very militaristic symbolism, right? Or they were to announce the arrival of the king. So if you ever notice this, when a king would come into town, if you read your history, he's kept walking in there, they got trumpets going and everything. And heck, here, you want to see something really weird? Go watch the old original Transformers movie, the cartoon from like 1985. Yeah, see, when Starscream was going to take over for Megatron, they were sitting there, Landon, come on, man. When he was being inaugurated, they were blowing the trumpets. And it looked silly because I didn't know how metal creatures could, blow a trumpet. But nevertheless, that's what they did. It's very real because he was saying, I'm your new king now. And then, of course, Galvatron comes and destroys him. But, come on, I like old cartoons. But seriously, back in those days, when a king would come through, they would announce his coming with a trumpet. Okay, so call to war, an arrival of the king, or how about this? They had a very specific use in the temple. I think most of the time they would call it a shofar, but what do you think that would be, Alan? Well, the use of the trumpet in this particular case, it was a call to repentance. It's okay. I was picking on you. But think about it. So we get to pick which one of these three. Hey, guess what? It's all three. So they're announcing, hey, there's a real call to war here, and we understand as we go a little bit further, there's a battle in a place called Harmageddon, is the actual proper Hebrew word, and its actual location in the Middle East. It's on a hill, Megiddo, all that happy stuff. It's announcing the arrival of the king, because remember, when the seventh seal was opened, we got the silence. Hey, guess who just came? And I'm sorry, as I was explaining to a friend who asked me, because when we were originally supposed to speak at the State House last week, I guess it would have been, no, it would have been 2 weeks ago, and we ended up not doing it, she asked, hey, how do you separate the church and politics? Well, we understand that we're not a political party, and the fact is we don't worship any earthly government. We have one king, that's it. One. And guess who just showed up? Okay? And then the call to repentance. If you read through the messages to the 7 churches, all of them but 2 are told to repent. And actually, when you get to the throne room, you also notice that normally where things are in 7s, and they talk about the 7 lampstands, and you have Ephesus and Thyatira and all these other things, there's only 2 lampstands. Because guess what? If you don't repent, you don't join in. And so there's this call to repentance, and realistically, this stuff should scare you, but it should scare you closer to the throne, not away from it, not because God's going to sit there waiting to smite you. It's because, hey, look, this is the reality of the road you're going down, right? It's sort of like that old SNL skit, you're going to live in a van down by the river. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So the use of the horns here, the trumpets, it's not an accident. John is being very deliberate at this time. Now we also have to note how Revelation is told in a series of 7s. The first 7, the seals, were to pry the people from their insecurities. Because that'll shake you. When you know the earth is shaking around you, or when my walls were shaking because the neighbor was playing his music too loud, okay, they didn't pry me from any insecurity. It just made me really annoyed. In this chapter, though, we are seeing that God is making war on the re-embodiment of the Egyptian empire, which in this case was Rome. See, because understand that God's people were always sort of suppressed by one person or another. Back in the Exodus times, it was Egypt. Then we moved forward, we got Babylon. And remember, as we go on in Revelation, they talk about the great whore of Babylon and how Babylon the Great has fallen and all this other stuff. And we talk about, he doesn't specifically start talking about Rome because that would be a bad idea. It's a good way to kind of come back with a really deep haircut. Right? So when we're reading these things, we should be reading and thinking, if we're really astute in our Old Testament literature, let my people go. So note the use of the incense whenever we talk about they're being filled. It says it is the prayers of God's people. They are a fragrant aroma in God's nostrils. It's not an accident that the prayers are combined with incense. If you go back and read through the temple, the temple instructions in Leviticus, you burn things in censers, and you had to do it in a very specific way. They were combined with incense, and if you made I think it was Abihu and Nadab, you do it wrong, you're dead, right? But God's prayer, or your prayers, are a sweet fragrance in God's nose, right? And so, if you think about it, there are people that would actually say, hey, isn't this a waste of God's prayer? No. Or your prayer? No. God really revels in them. But understand, it's combined with something, and then and they're used to destroy evil in the world, right? God doesn't do these sorts of things just because it's fun and he's like the guy with the giant magnifying glass and burning ants. No, that's not the point. Because God's justice will be served. Even if we don't see it happening, it happens. And at some point, all of us are called to that throne room and called to the carpet and say, hey, what'd you do with my blessing? To really kind of drill it down. You either try to advance the kingdom or you try to advance your own comfort. Again, calling back to that compromised Christian. And Thyatira, which again will be in the messages of the churches that will be on YouTube, basically you couldn't join the guild unless you compromised your faith. And if you didn't compromise your faith and join the guild, guess what? You didn't sell your stuff, you didn't eat. So you had a choice to make. Were you going to be a committed Christian and it was going to be hard, or were you going to live a comfortable life and give lip service to Christianity, all the while bowing your head to Domitian because of the imperial cult? So realistically, what follows in Revelation chapter 8, 7 through 9, it should remind us of what happened on Mount Sinai. But also, let's think about these first four trumpets. That if you really stop and think about what happened in the Exodus, it should really make some things pop in our minds, right? So the first trumpet brings hail, fire, and blood, which is reminiscent of the plagues in Exodus 9, 22 through 26, with some additions of Joel chapter 2, verse 30. And it burns up 1/3 of the vegetation on the earth. And I even put a note here for myself, not literal. Okay? Basically, things are going to start being destroyed because our focus is in the wrong place. Okay? So we have the river of blood, the Nile turned to blood, right? In the Exodus. Now we go to the next trumpet. It says, the second trumpet brings in burning mass to the sea, turning it to blood and killing the fish, which is a reference to Exodus chapter 7, verses 20 through 21. Also likely a reference to the destruction of Babylon. But the main thing we should note, the Nile was vitally important to Egypt. It was both its military and its economy. It was its military because it was a really good way to defend itself, but also to send its military out. But they also, that's how they grew things, that's how they made bricks. And, if that water is gone or unusable, Egypt is gone, done, that's it. Wormwood falls on the earth, a great star. If a star hits the earth, we're kaput. This is more proof that it's symbolic, probably just an extension of the second trumpet here. Because again, it lands in the water, it makes the waters unusable and undrinkable, right? Doesn't really do much more than that. And then the fourth trumpet darkens the planet, similar to the plague of darkness in Egypt. References Revelation chapter 6, 12 through 13, and a callback to Joel 3:15, when Joel said, the coming of the Lord is a time when the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. I'll let you know a little secret. When John was writing this, he had a wealth of stuff to base it on. So you'll find Daniel all through this. You will find Leviticus all through this. You will find Joel all through this. Zechariah. If you really want to understand Revelation, you've got to read all that. Daniel 9 in particular. Daniel 7 through 9, excuse me. It'll blow your ears off. Next slide. I can't remember. I think I still have a couple more. Oh, it is? Okay, well good. Never mind. I don't have any more. So now we got to start thinking, what's our application here? See, when you go on Facebook and you start seeing people with those memes that say, well, I'm just going outside and seeing what chapter of Revelation we're doing today. It's wrong. Because let's start thinking about this. There's nothing special about what's going on now that hasn't already happened in the past. Literally nothing. The only thing that differentiates between today and 2,000 years ago is the fact that we have the internet today. I'll just trust that it's funny. Sorry. I can pick on Marla because we're really good friends and we just do that. So what would be the application? Should we be cowering in fear because there's people up there blowing horns and things like that? Absolutely not. Because remember when Jesus said, hey, if you knew when the thief was coming, you'd be ready, right? That's why we don't set dates. I'm not a Millerite. I don't say, well, on August 4, 2021, that's when God's going to come back and he's coming to Buchanan, West Virginia, tell you what. No, it doesn't work that way. That's going to be really good on the channel, ain't it? Sorry. We really don't, we don't set the dates. We don't start looking and trying to correlate. That's a bad idea because people 1,000 years ago would try to correlate and say, well, this happened, so therefore, when I wasn't able to get my corn harvest to come in, that was when the fourth trumpet was blown and all this. No, it doesn't. No. Because there's no set date in there. There's none. And so what really should be calling is there are a couple things. Number one, these are punishments that are called upon on the unrepentant. And I don't know about you. I'm not going to be unrepentant. I'd rather be close to God for these sorts of things. I'd rather say, okay, you need to tell me what I need to let go of. And if you go back and read the messages to the churches, there's going to be things you can identify with. I personally argue that the American church is most like Laodicea. We think we've got it made. We don't need nothing. But that's wrong. See, because even though Laodicea is given the most harsh treatment, and he says, I'm about to have nothing to do with you. But then he says, but hey, I'm ready to come back to you and we're going to have dinner together. And dinner back then wasn't exactly something where we just go out to KFC or whatever and just kind of sit around the table and holler at each other. No, it was a very intimate thing. So saying something that I wanted to come and dine with you was not a little thing. And so start thinking about these things. What am I holding on to? Am I living a compromised life that is keeping me away from being with Jesus Christ? It's going to keep me on the side of that 1/3 or that 1/4 or whatever that says that now I'm in this part that's the chaff that's going to be burned away. Or do I still cling to Jesus? See, this should really create a sense of urgency like I talked about with the story earlier. In what way have we compromised our faith, number one? And number two, in what way can I use this to spur me on to be the person that God has called me to be? Because remember, and as Alan has said before, as you go, baptize in the name of the Father, preach the gospel, all that stuff. And if we're not able to do that as we're sitting at our desk at work, even if you can't directly preach the gospel, because I can't at work, no, cannot do it. But I can live the Christian life and be the example and say, hey, why are you like this person? Well, talk to me off the clock, and I'll tell you. See, people at my office know who I am. It didn't take them very long to figure it out. And so they celebrated some of the stuff that I was able to do, get the degree and all this other happy stuff. But what has been more important to them has nothing to do with all the books I've read, has nothing to do with all the classes I took, has nothing to do with the papers I've written. Yeah, they tell me in the moment, hey, that's pretty impressive you did that. But what sticks with them is how I try to live out my life as Jesus Christ would call me to do, and to be Christ to them. Because that's a fragrant aroma that we're called to do. And so I figure we're going to be ending this recording here in a second, but I personally think, and I'm betting Jeff would agree with me, I think we need to still spend some time in prayer here. And what we want to do is we want to start thinking about how can we pray for have the things revealed to us that we are still holding on in compromise. How can we let those things go? How can we stop being so self-reliant and rely more on Jesus Christ? See, because when we read about these trumpets and we see the horrible destruction from God's point of view, it's a spiritual battle. So we actually shouldn't be afraid of that battle raging inside of us because, number one, it's not our battle. But number two, it's killing off the things that don't need to be there. We really should be thankful that we have a God that takes the time to fight for us and fight with us, right? So we shouldn't really be frightened by all this imagery and the things and the mark of the beast and the dragon that comes up out of the sea and the abyss and the 1,000 years and all that stuff. It's just pictures. Because if we really think about it, once we get to chapter 11 and we see the key of repentance, we start thinking about that Revelation 4, Revelation 5, and then Revelation 21 and 22 experience, where guess what? Hey, the sea is no more because chaos has been destroyed. Who wants to live like that? And I think if your hand is not like kind of waving, then we need to talk.